Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Now, last year, President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Nigerian Correctional Service Act, which repeals the old law and gave the institution a new name. What used to be Nigerian Prisons Service is now called the Nigerian Correctional Service. In light of this new development, a new act, which was signed in 2019, seeks to improve so many aspects of the Nigerian criminal justice system.
Very well said, Sheet. So the Nigerian Correctional Service Act 2019 will increase the quality of justice dispensed by providing the correctional officers a platform for facilitation and provision of restorative justice models, and this will be applicable at different phases of the criminal justice process where suitable and agreed by both victims and the offenders. So joining us now from our Abuja studios to discuss the Nigerian New Correctional Service Act is Dr. Uju Agomoh, the founder, executive director, Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, PRAWA. She's also the president of International Corrections and Prison Association Africa chapter and the team lead of the Prisons and Corrections component of the Nigerian Security and Justice Reform Program of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office of the British government. It's a joy to talk to you, if you can hear me. I read the Act, about 36 pages of the Act, and I just, started underlining some parts in there that I wanted to talk about very strongly. I mean, the first part will be the gamut of who finally becomes the Controller General. I think you should explain that in detail because I'm seeing the fact that, okay, the board will meet from the Assistant Controller Generals of the prisons before they'll pick out somebody. But over the years, we know how those processes go, and there's been a lot of back and forth as regards the process on this. Can you just explain that act to me before we, latch into other acts in there?
Okay, thank you very much. First and foremost, just some of the intros that you had in terms of my role as the president of the International Corrections and Prisoners Association for African chapter was in the past. So so I'm the former president for the African chapter. The same thing in terms of the role in terms of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office is also a former role. So just to mention that those two were things I did in the past. Now, specifically in terms of the provision that you have spoken in relation to the appointment of the Controller General, I think one of the key things that one would really flag, especially coming in terms of the discussions that were held during some of the technical sessions, in terms of when the bill when it was still a bill and it was being reviewed, was the need to ensure that are clear guidelines, that the need to ensure that you are also having people who will have enough time to have been in the service and enough time to spend after their appointment as the Controller General. And the submissions that were given were, for many of the persons who spoke in support of what you see now as the content of that provision, was that it would be useful to have someone who was in the cadre of the Assistant Controller General, which was basically that discussion. And their argument was that once that is the case, the person would be able to stay longer time in the service once they have been given that particular appointment. And we shouldn't also forget the fact that the other provisions linked to this relates to the issues about what the qualifications should be, what the target should be, so that there would be some sense of security of tenure. And I think this is really important when we look at the African context. It is perhaps with the exception of Uganda, where you have the Controller General of Correctional Service, or what is Correctional Service in Uganda, who tend to have a 4-year term. And then after that 4-year term, nobody can remove them except if they have violated certain things. And they can then renew for another 4-year term. And, so we think that this particular thing of having a situation where there's guarantee of tenure, it can help in promoting more leadership focus and reform within correctional services across Africa.
Okay. So you, alongside other pressure groups, have seen this act come together, and Section 2 clearly states that its compliance with international human rights and good correctional practices. Now, my question to you is: in what other ways does this act meet up to international best practices?
I'll give you some concrete examples. I mean, if you look at Section 9, for example, Section 9, it's almost like the same as what used to be in the former Prison Act. But the difference is that there is now a proviso. That Section 9 is a section that gives the power to the minister to designate a particular place as a prison, okay? Now, in this case, as a correctional center. But in the former act, there was nothing that makes it, state-setting criteria that need to be in place before such a building is so designated. But now, with the new law, the proviso say that whichever building or space that the minister would designate as a correctional center must comply with issues around basic standards in terms of medical, health, floor space, sanitary facilities, water, and all the rest of that. If you look at Section 24, again, Section 24 talks about mental health. Before now, you find a situation where a lot of, even the previous act had no comment around the issue of mental health. Now, if you go to many of the facilities, you do have people who are classified as the so-called civil lunatics and those classified as the criminal lunatics. The civil lunatics, technically you're looking at people who are really based on detention, based on a very archaic law, the lunacy law of many of the states. And many of these people have not really committed an offense. These are things that were done before you have psychiatric hospitals as we have it now. Now, you also provisions that talk about promoting, preventing torture, for example. It's all there. You look at the provision that talks about the fact that those who work within the facilities in prison in terms of reformation and rehabilitation, that they need to gain or earn certain income out of that enterprise. So whereby now that the resources have to be divided into 3, and one particular part of that fund will be kept towards the rehabilitation of that person. I will also mention to you that there are certain aspects of the form, maybe I just mentioned this, the issue that states, and this is verbatim in terms of the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules in terms of treatment of prisoners. It says that work should not be of afflictive nature. Labor should not be of afflictive nature. And there are many other ways.
Okay. I just want to come in here and ask about some part of the Act. I think it was about the first part, 1 or 2 chapters in the Act that I saw this, and this struck me. The fact that those in charge of the prisons must make a report to the court not less than 1 week or more once they see that the prisons are congested. And immediate measures must be taken. I'm just trying to quote extemporaneously now. Is that realistic in Nigeria today where most prisons are overcrowded? Is that realistic in Nigeria today? And I also want to add one more question in that line. Okay, answer this question. I'll come back and add this other question to it. Just go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. This, you're speaking in terms of Section 12. This is one of the very, very creative and progressive aspects of this new law. Now, look at it. First, I must say to you, it's not all the custodial facilities that are congested. You have about 30 of them in this country that have very high number of awaiting trial persons and obviously very high congestion rate. And these are mainly the ones that are located in cosmopolitan areas. So there are also facilities that are under locking. By the way, the Controller General have the power to move any particular inmates from a custodial facility, from one custodial facility to another, irrespective of the country, the states where that facility is located. The only problem is that when they are awaiting trial, because of logistic issues, because they have to go to court, it becomes an issue and a challenge. So many of the time, that movement doesn't happen. Whilst the state controller can do that within the facilities that are within the state. Now, this is what Section 24, the spirit behind Section 24. Now, first of all, what it does to do is to enable the correctional officers to set up what is called the early warning signal. So when you notice that something is going wrong, you notice that your facility is going beyond the official capacity, what you do is that you trigger that warning by saying to the relevant agencies that have the power to do something about it, the Chief Judge, the Prerogative of Mercy Committee, the Attorney General of the state, and et cetera, et cetera. So when you trigger, you are telling them, look, we are reading the danger zone. So please, we need to do something. And there are many things that can be done because the law also provides a window of 3 months. So from the time that triggering, that early warning signal goes off, from that time, there is a 3-month period. What you are supposed to do is that anything that can be done to reduce that population. So whether they're required to do a jail delivery, whether it's a question of sending a directive to other courts to make sure that people are sent to other prisons within the same state, or whether they are asking for a situation where people who needs to be, prerogative of mercy to set in and all the rest of that, or maybe sending many of the people who are about 5-6 months to leave or whatever it is to low-risk persons to facilities just like prison farms, or even using more of the non-custodial measures. So what this new law have done, which we have never seen before, is that, for the correctional officers who are wearing the shoe, they know how it pinches them. If you remember the argument before the transfer of vehicles, Black Maria, the then Black Maria to the Correctional Service, whereby they said, if the police is the one doing this transfer, you don't know where there is the major challenge in terms of the people you are living with. Because they live in and out with these persons, these inmates, they know when the danger is there. So the idea is to promote collaborative effort. The Correctional Service alone cannot solve the problem.
Okay.
So it is for them to do that early triggering.
Okay. Real quickly, I just want to alert you, we'll have a break in the next 50 seconds, so I have to cut you when you start answering this question. The next part I'd like to talk about, it's part of the middle sections of that act, that talks about in cases where inmates are impregnated by people that might be in the prison, that might be, overseeing them in the prison, the prison officials and things like that. The penalties look like a slap in the hand for me. 3 million, 5 million naira. Why don't they face the full gamut of the law? Why are they not tried? Correct me if I'm wrong on the penalties, because I just saw 3 million, 4 million, and 5 million naira penalties there. Please, can you start talking about that? But we'll go on a break in the next 30, 40 seconds, just to alert you. Please go ahead. Okay.
First, I'm thinking you are looking, if you look at, for example, the whole section 34, that talks about things related to the female.
Can you hear me? We'll go on a quick break. When we come back, you'll answer this,
I can.
Please. Thank you. We'll go on a quick break. All right, still the morning show here on Rise News, and we're talking about correctional facilities. And I asked a question earlier on, Doctor, before we went on that break, and I was talking about people that get pregnant, and I was talking about the penalties. Can you just talk to us through the gamut of, for instance, somebody gets pregnant, it's caused by somebody, or maybe she might be pregnant even before she gets to the prison. Just the gamut of the female prisoner getting pregnant and obeying the call of nature. What's the laws and everything around it? Okay.
First, this is what you can see in terms of Section 34 of the new law. The spirit behind that section, it's really to... Sorry.
Just go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, the spirit behind that Section 34 is not only about protecting the rights of the female offender or female inmate, but also to protect the rights of every other person or being connected to that inmate, including the fetus if the person is pregnant, or the baby if the person had been given to bed or came to the inmate prisons with that. Now, if you look at a lot of the things you see in that provision, it's actually saying that there need to be a test when the person comes in, not later than 2 weeks, to be able to know whether this inmate is pregnant. And because sometimes somebody may be pregnant without even knowing it. And the reason is that once they know on time, they can actually be able to arrange, but make sure that the nutritional facilities and all the rest of that is being put in place. Now, just also make sure that this person was pregnant before the time the person came into the custodial facility. So that's why that needs to be done. Then if there be any reason, and by the way, if you must also know that Section 34 is now saying that we should no longer have female facilities within already a male facility, as we have in many of the centers. Now, we are talking about separate facilities. So the chances are also reducing those kind of chances where you have male, because when you have the female unit, usually it is only for all the female officers that are within that unit. So that needs to be taken also into consideration. I want to read for you Section 34, subsection 5, which alludes to the direct question you were asking, so that we understand what exactly the Act says. The Act says here in Section 34, subsection 5, where a female inmate is found to be pregnant while in custody, an investigation, including a DNA analysis, where needed, shall be conducted to ascertain who is responsible, and the perpetrator shall be prosecuted. Do you understand? So, in short, what you are asking to be done is actually already been captured here.
Can I quickly come in here? You know, you're talking about this DNA analysis that has to be done in case a female inmate is considered pregnant. However, is there already a DNA database of all the men working in the prison in the prison wards, so that when this happens, it's easier to do the match? Or how are you going to find out?
You know, first, I mean, remember, I can't be holding the brief. I'm not I don't work for the Correctional Service. I work for a civil society organization. All I'm saying to you that the content of this law is such that will enable us get to where we're looking for. What I really feel very worried about is the pace of implementation. Because I will tell you, I have visited over 150 prisons and correctional facilities in more than 39 countries. They have seen and reviewed many of their laws. I will tell you, I don't know of any, especially in Africa or anywhere, that has as better provision as what we have here. But when you have a wonderful law and you don't implement it or start supporting or provide the resources to do it, it becomes a problem. So now, in terms of that database, I would say to you, even if they don't have it now, first, the key thing is that once this happens, how do we begin to activate? Because, you know, if it is easy to reduce that number. If you find how many males have come in contact or likely to have come in contact with a particular offender, if you found or prove that this happened while the person is in custody, it's easy. You just take the samples and then be able to match whether they have a data bank or not regarding this. So my point is that we will get to where we need to get to, but we need to start the work. A journey of 1,000 miles, they tell me, it starts with a step. But let's begin to do that. And I want to also say this. We need a lot of different agencies. You know, different people need to put hands. You know, it's not just about the government. It's the private sector, the civil society, whoever, because this is something that will help this country. And it's not just helping the people who are in custody. It's also making us safer in terms of the community, because a lot of what has been put here is about the community correction, which I'm not going to speak here because you haven't really asked a question on this. But I think that we need to really think, because to go beyond just it being written in the law book, we need to have action on it.
Now, we are seeing this change of name from the Nigerian Prisons Service to the Nigerian Correctional Service. My question to you now is, how would you rate the percentage of reformation and rehabilitation and also reintegration of these prisoners back into the society, and even like the correctional community service and things that they have to do if they are not a threat to society, before signing the Act and now that the Act has been signed?
I think first, the fact that we have a law, first of all, I must say that before the Act, we didn't have a possibility of a fast-tracked mechanism to enable this country have a pool of resources in terms of personnel and already institutionalized mechanism, because these people are already being paid, that will be able to provide this service across the state. So with the exception of Lagos, where you have the community service, you know, being piloted or being implemented, you find that while the different states, many of the states have passed the administration of criminal justice laws, which tend to provide also for many of these non-custodial measures. But nothing was happening about it because there is not enough pool of personnel to provide that service. Now, what this new law have done is that it has now said, as part of the mandate of the Correctional Service, that it will not only be about dealing with people who are in custody, as we have already known the prisons to be, but also to provide personnel who will then supervise those who will need to be in the community. And this community correction is so critical. Critical because there is not everybody who you find in so-called prison today or custodial facility need to be there. There are persons who are minor offenders, petty offenders. Why then do you need to waste money and put them in a facility where the society and the government will pay through taxpayers' money to feed them? Instead of them putting them in the community, having them to either do community service to do the work. So now, having this pool is useful because it then means that every state that wants to begin to work on this, it's already possible to begin to have people who can work on this. But of course, more of the community correctional personnel needs to be designated. We need to be able to make proper training. So that's one thing. Secondly, for you to have also some of the provisions, now you're looking at it's not just only about parole, it's not only about preparation, it's not only about community service, but also you have the issue about restorative justice and also any other that the court may so designate. So you have the law there. So I think that's one major thing that it satisfies, and the fact that you have a correctional service that is now able to, that can be empowered to move on this. Okay,
Dr. Uju Agomoh, as we wrap up, we've got less than a minute to wrap up, but I just want to ask you this. How is this going to add to the life of the prisoner? Because when you go to prison, and it's a correctional facility, it's to correct you and it will make you better before you go back to society. I mean, when you check historically, prisons in America were the coolest place to live in. In fact, there was a story about a prison having running water before the White House. So how are we going to make the conditions better? And how are we going to improve people with skills? I want to hear people get out of prison and get PhDs in Nigeria as we wrap up.
Okay, I think the best way to look at it is that everybody must put hand to support the process. Secondly, for us to also not see custodial facility as the only option of dealing with deviant behavior or antisocial behavior or criminality. You need to use the best tool of sanction to deal with this issue. So you look at how do we ensure that the community correction component is strengthened? Because apart from those who have served their sentences, remember that when they go into the community, there are still some that may still be at risk. So therefore, risk of offending. Therefore, we must have a proper mechanism in the community to monitor, supervise, and all that. The society should also stop stigmatizing.
Dr. Uju Agomoh, would like to say a big thank you to you for your time. Thank you so much. I'm sure you started this, and everybody was joining to make our correctional facilities truly correctional. Definitely. That brings us to the end of the show today. I'm Rufai Hosseini.
And I'm Shaitan Atigari. Thank you so much for watching. You can also follow us on all the social media handles showing now on the screen. This is Arise News.